For this old weather front that's providing quite a few showers out there through this evening over parts of Wales and southern Scotland. One or two heavy ones over southwest Scotland. Tending to ease off as we go through the evening and overnight. Most of us will have a dry night with clear spells. Could just turn a little misty once more across East Anglia in the southeast. One or two fog patches here. Still quite warm here, but elsewhere a reasonably comfortable night, and certainly across the northwest temperatures well down into single figures in rural areas. So a coolish start here, but generally a sunny start. Most places having a fine, bright day on Saturday. Not everywhere dry. There will still be one or two showers scattered across northern England. One or two for the Midlands, maybe one or two in the south as well. But as I said, most places won't see those showers stay dry. A little warmer as well. Temperatures in the south in the mid-20s, further north, high teens or low 20s. Thickening cloud in the northwest will bring a bit of patchy rain to northern parts of Northern Ireland and western Scotland during Saturday evening, but elsewhere, any showers disappearing. For most dry and clear nights, and again, reasonably comfortable, although temperatures will start off in the teens as we head into Sunday. Again, Sunday, for the vast majority, dry and bright with sunny spells. Early cloud across the northwest. That should tend to drift away as we go through the day. Perhaps a bit more cloud across northeastern parts of England. Again, one or two isolated showers come the afternoon, but for the vast majority, dry and a little warmer. Temperatures more widely over 20 Celsius, mid-20s quite widely across the south. The breeze just picking up a little bit along the south coast. That will be a feature of Monday's weather. Quite a strong wind along the south coast, a little cooler in the east, but more sunny spells.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Had
Hello and welcome to GB News on your TV and on digital radio. I'm the Reverend Calvin Robinson, covering for Nana this week. And for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and it's yours. We'll be debating and discussing, and at times disagreeing, but no one will be cancelled. Joining me today, it's consultant editor at the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and Conservative councillor Claire Pearsall. It's Pearce and Pearsall today. Sounds like a cop show, doesn't it? Before we get started, let's get the latest news and headlines.
Thank you, Calvin. Good afternoon. It is exactly 4 o'clock. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. Households struggling with the cost of living are now facing an 80% hike in their energy bills. Ofgem has announced the price cap will increase from just under £2,000 to over £3,500 in October. The government has acknowledged the rise will cause stress for many, but Prime Minister Boris Johnson says help is coming.
Line of cash stretches out throughout the autumn. So there's going to be another £650 coming for every one of the 8 million most vulnerable households in October. In November, another £300 to help every pensioner, £150 extra for everybody who is entitled to disability benefits, on top of what we're doing with universal credit and the living wage, lifting both of those up.
Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says more focus needs to be on the energy companies and what they can do to alleviate the pain.
We need to have a freeze on those energy prices. Do not let them go up to those levels, and pay for that in part by a windfall tax on the oil and gas companies on those excess profits. Meanwhile, you've got a government that is missing in action, and I think most people looking in today would say that is unforgivable from the government in the middle of a cost of living crisis.
£500,000 in support has been announced for Liverpool following the shooting of Olivia Pratt-Corbell. A 36-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murdering the 9-year-old who was shot in her home on Monday night. Home Secretary Priti Patel says a package of measures will help both the community and police.
Today I am announcing additional support for the local community, and I've been speaking to the Mayor of Liverpool about this since Tuesday, and it's very specific in terms of community support that will cover a lot of the trauma support for local families, for local residents. I'm bringing forward £350,000, and that's on top of £10 million that's already coming to Merseyside. We call it GRIP funding, but it's funding that's targeted to deal with serious violence reduction. So that's getting weapons off the streets.
A man has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 23 years and 4 months for the murder of Lily Sullivan in Pembroke. Lewis Haynes was caught on CCTV with the teenager on the night she was killed, just before Christmas last year. The 31-year-old strangled Lily after she rebuffed his advances and left her body in a reservoir. DCI Richard Yelland hopes the sentence will go some way in helping her family and friends rebuild their lives.
Lewis Haynes passed numerous opportunities to seek help when fleeing the scene of his crime. The life sentence handed down to Lewis Haynes today ensures that he will not be able to freely harm others in the community. Dyfed-Powys Police and our partnership will continue to work tirelessly to bring to justice those who perpetrate violence against women and girls in all its forms. This sentencing is no consolation for the family and friends of Lily, but I hope this will be a step forward in the slow process of rebuilding their lives.
The number of people crossing the English Channel in small boats this year has passed 24,000. Ministry of Defence figures show more than 800 migrants in 16 small boats yesterday, the second busiest day of the year so far. That as the cost of the UK's asylum system topped £2 billion a year for the first time, following the highest number of claims in 2 decades. Over 900 people have been killed in Pakistan in floods that have affected more than 30 million people over the last few weeks. The country's climate minister has called it a humanitarian disaster of epic proportions and says the heavy rainfall is climate-induced. Pakistan's urging the international community to help with relief efforts as it struggles with the aftermath. Royal Mail's chief executive has apologised to customers for a disrupted service following today's industrial action. More than 100,000 postal staff have walked off the job in a dispute over pay. It's the first of 4 days of strikes, with more being held on the 31st, as well as next month on the 8th and the 9th. The Communication Workers Union, which is demanding a pay rise that's more in line with inflation, says it's the biggest strike in the UK since 2009. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now let's return to Nana Akua with Calvin Robinson.
You're with me, Calvin Robinson, covering for Nana this week on GB News, on TV and on digital radio. Now, Rotherham Council has won a government bid to become the UK's first children's capital of culture. In 2025, the South Yorkshire town will be branded the title in what is frankly one of the most tone-deaf moves this government has made to date. Rotherham is infamous for the overwhelming number of CSE cases, that's child sexual exploitation. A recent report estimates over 1,400 children were sexually abused in Rotherham in the last decade. For a town with a population of just over 100,000 at the last census, that's 10% of the population. It's practically endemic. Despite all this, the government awarded Rotherham £1.8 million and the title of UK's first children's capital of culture. An absolute mockery and an affront to those poor young girls who were victims of such horrid evil. They're not wrong, though. Rotherham is a capital of culture, Pakistani Muslim grooming gang culture. However, that's nothing to celebrate. It's something both local and national governments have failed to prevent over decades. This is an institutional atrocity. Politicians, police, and social workers were complicit in the cover-ups, all in the name of diversity. Well, let me tell you, diversity is not always a strength. Rotherham councillor Dave Shepherd said to the Daily Mail, "We're making improvements that will help change the perception of Rotherham." It's not perceptions that matter, Councillor Dave. It's child grooming. Put an end to it. The worst thing about all of this is that it's still going on today. Not just in Rotherham, but in Telford, Oldham, Rochdale, and many other unfortunate towns and cities across the UK. This issue is it's a problem that no one wants to talk about because people are afraid of being labelled racist. I raised this topic myself a few days ago and recently got called an anti-Muslim bigot. It's a great shame that people are quick to defend rapists and slow to defend victims. According to the report into child sex abuse in Rotherham by Baroness J, the majority of the perpetrators were Pakistani of origin. To dismiss facts as bigotry is to put political correctness above the lives of young girls. The report said several staff members were afraid that they would be labelled as racists if they identified the race of the perpetrators. Qualifiers like "not all Muslims" are unhelpful. Firstly, it's obvious no one would suspect all Muslims of belonging to grooming gangs. But more importantly, it's a distraction. When the topic of conversation is shifted back to whether it's appropriate or not to criticise the Muslim culture, we're not addressing the issue at hand. This is a crime that is predominant in a particular demographic, so it's important that we find out why. My concern is that there's an incompatibility between Pakistani Muslim values and British values. I believe we need to pressure the authorities to put an end to this ongoing evil, and we need to demand justice for those young girls. The other accusation people face when we raise this issue is one of xenophobia. Well, if it's xenophobia against this specific group, Pakistani Muslim rape gangs, then yes, call me xenophobic. And that's what they are. They're not grooming gangs. Let's not pretty it up with safe language. They are child rapists. This is a fight between good and evil. This isn't a time to be politically correct. We can support the victims of this horrible abuse, or we can support the perpetrators. To the people who would call us Islamophobic, I say, do not be an apologist for child rape. It's time we stopped being afraid. Don't be afraid of hurty words. Labels like bigot, racist, xenophobe, they no longer mean anything in this context. Don't let the opposition shut down the conversation. Let's keep the conversation alive and let the politicians, police forces and social services know that we want the young girls put first And we don't want to hear about diversity or multiculturalism or anti-Muslim bigotry or racism or xenophobia. It's time they got their priorities straight and protected the lives of young girls up and down this country. Before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. At 5 o'clock, it's Friday Focus. I've just been speaking about it, and I'm shining a light today on the Pakistani Muslim child rape gangs. How on earth has Rotherham, the town at the centre of Britain's most notorious child sex scandals, been named as the country's first children's capital of culture? I'll be joined by a survivor of grooming and child rape to discuss her thoughts. And in the great British debate this hour, I'm asking, should Djokovic be allowed to play in the US Open? Tennis legend Novak Djokovic has been denied entry to the United States over his vaccination status, so he won't be able to compete in this year's US Open. Whilst the US government has changed its policy on COVID testing before entering the country, it remains stringent for unvaccinated visitors. As countries around the world begin to relax their coronavirus regulations, it begs the question whether it's time for the states to catch up. At the end of the hour, 75% of patients suffering with IBS have reported fewer symptoms after receiving a microbe transplant from a healthy donor. Irritable bowel syndrome costs the NHS almost £12 million per year. This pioneering research could help thousands with bowel conditions and help save the pennies in the UK taxpayers' pockets too. That's coming up in the next hour. Tell me what you think on everything we'll be discussing today by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Right, let's get started. Welcome again to my panel, consultant editor at the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and Conservative councillor, Claire Pearsall. First, I want to discuss the story that I've just been talking about. Claire, what are your initial thoughts?
Well, I think you're right in what you said. I really do, because this is a subject that has been brushed under the carpet more times than you can shake a stick at. £1.8 million worth of taxpayers' money is going to a city which allowed 1,400 young girls to be raped. How can that in any way be a sensible use of money? And let's not forget that by not being offensive to a population, it has also put at risk Pakistani girls who are also at risk of abuse. Many of them are sent off for forced marriages, and the abuse that they have at home is appalling. So now we're looking at that group as well. So, no, I think this money needs to be taken away. It needs to be looked at again. Do we actually need to have a children's city of culture in the first place? I know that's a slightly different debate, but I do wonder that these sort of titles that come up, do we actually need them? Do we need to spend money on them? What is it for? If it's to pretty up a city, then that city needs to do that itself with its own money and not take £1.8 million worth of ours in order to do so. Yeah. But I do think that we need to have a sensible conversation when looking at the demographics of who is committing a crime, whether they be Pakistani, whether they be white British, whether they be African American, you name it. We need to have a proper discussion, not just pile in and suggest that it's racist and we shouldn't look at it.
Because after all, what's worse, the child abuse or the offence caused by
absolutely. And if we look at it like that, then we will never solve any crime.
Yeah. Andrew, I think we're all going to agree on this panel on this topic today, but let's hear your thoughts.
Look, for certain. And do you know, I think we're entitled to be told who in government decided this was a good idea. Who on God's earth thought Rotherham, that's the place we'll go, this notorious, infamous city?
I can answer that. It's Michael Gove.
Michael Gove, the former Levelling Up Secretary, who I can guarantee will not be in Liz Truss's cabinet. Well, I used to work with Michael at the time. He's a very clever man, very thoughtful, one of the cleverest people in the government. But this is a very unclever decision. It's a bad decision. And by the way, I agree completely with Claire. What on earth do we need this stupid capital of culture for anyway? That money could be better spent on job opportunities or helping people in social care. That would be a real contribution to Rotherham. But it is a stain on England, what happened in Rotherham, and not least because the police turned a blind eye, so did local councillors, so did social workers, and probably a lot of them are still in their jobs and have not been held to account. How many people lost their jobs over this scandal?
What I don't understand is it's not just the Levelling Up Minister, the whole department, the civil service, everyone involved in that decision of approving Rotherham of this capital of culture. Surely they're aware of what's been going on in Rotherham over the last few years. Well, not even a few years, a few decades.
Well, they probably thought that's what we'll do. This will help rebuild Rotherham's reputation. That's a really clever thing. We'll call it a cultural place where these girls are subjected to a horrific nightmare that went on for years. I mean, they were being passed around like rag dolls. And they were going to the police, they were complaining, and nobody was listening.
And I think that's possibly one of the worst bits of it, is that when they did complain to the police, they weren't believed. They were told, don't be so silly, off you go, this is entirely your fault. So those police officers, the social workers, the schools, what part they played in all of this? And you're right, nobody has lost their job over this. But here we are, offering money to something which isn't going to benefit the children of Rotherham.
Well, let's ask that question, because could this money be used to benefit the children of Rotherham, or how could it be used to benefit the children of Rotherham?
I mean,
it won't be. We know what's going to happen. It'll be that the local council spend money on receptions and all sorts of things, and they'll get authors to come along, and it'll last about 2 days. It'll get good local publicity, and it'll be gone. It's a complete waste of time in the first place.
Is that the point of it, though? Publicity and changing the image of the town?
Well, it seems that is entirely what the money will be used for, and that is an absolute disgrace. If it is meant to be there to showcase culture and children's lives, then it shouldn't be used to cover up the stain that is that particular city.
So I'll ask you both, if there is a pot of £1.8 million being sent to Rotherham, and that's going to happen, how can we put it to good use?
I'd spend it with children's charities.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. It needs to go on counselling services and youth services for those children.
Broken homes. Because a lot of these kids were from broken homes.
Yeah.
This is how Jimmy Savile plied his trade for years and years, the infamous paedophile. He was going into children's homes, he was going to broken homes where nobody would believe these girls because they were from fallen, they had perhaps no parents, or they were in care, so they didn't have a real voice. And that's what these disgusting paedophiles did to these girls in Rotherham. They were from very similar backgrounds, so that's what the money should be spent on.
But that's what concerns me. So these girls, when they did go to the police would ask them questions like, did you consent? And we know an underage girl cannot consent. That is rape. They will ask questions like, are you a child prostitute? That's not a thing. There's no such thing as a child prostitute.
No.
Again, that's rape, that's abuse. What can we do to... I mean, if the police don't know the basic common laws that the rest of us know, what can we do to improve matters in Rotherham?
Well, I think we need to start by actually believing victims, and I think that was the real problem, and you're right, because they came from broken backgrounds, they weren't trusted, they were looked at as suspicious. Did they have a drink problem? Did they have a drug problem? Yeah, they probably did, as a result of the circumstances that they were in. So how about we treat them for those addictions and actually treat them with the respect that they need, and also the fact is that they're children. So therefore we need to believe what they've said, because they cannot be a child prostitute, as you quite rightly say. That isn't a thing.
So these girls were seen as the lowest of the low because they were vulnerable, because they were from childcare. Is this a cultural issue, or is this a class issue? If these were not white working class girls, would they be in this situation? Or would they be treated the same way that they were treated?
It's a very good question, because, as I said before, there are Pakistani girls in that community who are also at risk and are abused, but it is quite often hidden away by those communities. I think a lot more work needs to have been done with the communities themselves. Now, Rotherham Council didn't reach out to the communities. They had a few faith leaders around, but they didn't work with those communities to say, actually, do you know what's going on in your own communities? Do you think this is right? What are you going to do about it? There was none of that, and I think for proper cohesion, you need to have it.
Andrew, you're nodding. Do you think the communities themselves should have stood up more and said, this is wrong, this cannot be happening in our community?
It's a very close-knit community, the Muslim community. The majority of the men go to the mosques. Women go through another entrance, of course. And the imam wields enormous influence. And were they deaf? Did they not know what was happening? It was a failure of the Muslim community leadership, of the police, of the system, an entire failure of the establishment. And if to read it, if you've read some of the report, it's heartbreaking. Actually, some of those women will never, ever recover from the emotional scars. Some of them were made pregnant, and there were abortions and unwanted children. The cycle of misery just continued.
It's absolutely awful. We'll be coming back to this later on in the programme. You're with me, Calvin Robinson, covering for Nana this week on GBNews, on your TV and on your digital radio. After the break, it's time for the Great British Debate. This hour, I'm asking, should Novak Djokovic be allowed to play at the US Open? Tennis legend Novak Djokovic has been denied entry to the US over his vaccination status. so he won't be able to compete in the US Open this year. Whilst the US government has changed its policy on COVID testing before entering the country, it remains stringent for unvaccinated visitors. As countries around the world begin to relax their coronavirus regulations, it begins to beg the question whether it's time for the United States to play catch-up. Send us your emails, gbviews@gbnews.uk, and tell us what you think. You can also tweet us at GBNews. And there's a poll up right now asking, should Djokovic be allowed to play in the US Open? Cast your votes. First, here's the weather.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update. A bank holiday weekend for much of the UK, and most places are going to have a dry 3 days with sunny spells as well. Feeling quite pleasant in the sunny spells as well, certainly on Saturday and Sunday. There's high pressure nearby and it will be building in for the weekend, but for the time being we do have this old weather front that's providing quite a few showers out there through this evening over parts of Wales and southern Scotland, one or two heavy ones over southwest Scotland, tending to ease off as we go through the evening and overnight. Most of us will have a dry night with clear spells. Could just turn a little misty once more across East Anglia in the southeast, one or two fog patches here. Still quite warm here, but elsewhere a reasonably comfortable night, and certainly across the northwest temperatures well down into single figures in rural areas. So a coolish start here, but generally a sunny start. Most places having a fine bright day on Saturday. Not everywhere dry. There will still be one or two showers scattered across northern England, one or two for the Midlands, maybe one or two in the south as well. But as I said, most places won't see those showers stay dry. A little warmer as well, temperatures in the south in the mid-20s, further north, high teens or low 20s. Thickening cloud in the northwest will bring a bit of patchy rain to northern parts of Northern Ireland and western Scotland during Saturday evening, but elsewhere, any showers disappearing for most dry and clear nights, and again, reasonably comfortable, although temperatures will start off in the teens as we head into Sunday. Again, Sunday, for the vast majority, dry and bright with sunny spells. Early cloud across the northwest. That should tend to drift away as we go through the day. Perhaps a bit more cloud across northeastern parts of England. Again, one or two isolated showers come the afternoon, but for the vast majority, dry and a little warmer. Temperatures more widely over 20 Celsius, mid-20s quite widely across the south. The breeze just picking up a little bit along the south coast. That will be a feature of Monday's weather. Quite a strong wind along the south coast, a little cooler in the east, but more sunny spells.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
You're with Calvin Robinson covering for Nana this week on GB News, on TV and on digital radio. It's time for the great British debate this hour. I'm asking, should Novak Djokovic be allowed to play at the US Tennis Open? He's been denied entry to the United States over his vaccination status, so he won't be able to compete in this year's competition. The 21 Grand Slam champion has previously said that he wouldn't get jabbed even if it meant that he would miss out on winning trophies. The tennis star's defiant attitude towards the freedom of choice could hinder his chances of being known as the all-time great, as Rafael Nadal currently holds the most Grand Slams, 22. While the US government has changed its policy on testing before entering the country, it remains stringent for unvaccinated visitors. Countries around the world have relaxed COVID regulations, begging the question whether it's time for the states to start playing catch-up. So for the great British debate this hour, I'm asking, should Novak Djokovic be allowed to play in the US Open? I'm joined by tennis correspondent Barry Flatman. Barry, thank you so much for joining us. What does this mean for you personally, first and foremost, as a tennis fanatic?
Well, I think Djokovic by now should be up to speed with what's going on. He's suffered enough in the past couple of years, certainly earlier this year, by not being allowed into Australia. And he's letting the opportunity to win Grand Slams and elevate himself above Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal potentially, and become the greatest player of all time.
Sure, and players must be gutted, right? Because they won't see him competing to become the greatest player of all time.
Other players must be gutted. I think other players see it as a great opportunity without the best hardcore player around.
But do you not want to be the best by playing against the best? And this has scuppered his chances entirely of taking over Rafael Nadal's #1 Grand Slam title wins, hasn't it?
Well, it appears to be doing so, yes. And if he continues to take this stubborn stand, he won't be allowed into Australia in January. That's a given. So then we go on to Paris next year, French Open. And it does appear that he's not quite the clay court player that he was a few years ago.
Do you think that this policy makes any sense when players themselves could be unvaccinated, or Novak Djokovic could test himself before playing, and all the other players have said they're fine to play against him? Who's being protected by this?
Well, I'm not sure other players would test themselves. I think a lot of the majority of other players, the overwhelming majority of other players, get tested and make sure that they're in the clear. And if you go to a Grand Slam, it's in the locker rooms, in the players' lounges. It's a very closely knit community where it's the sort of thing where viruses can be passed around. And another thing that I think should always be borne in mind about Novak Djokovic is that a few years ago, when he was very, very flippant and blasé about the spread of corona, he organised a tour which was almost flaunting the rules. And a number of players actually came down with coronavirus after this tour. And I think the powers that be won't forget that in a hurry.
Well, travelling is a major part of this game. Do you think he should take the vaccine in order to travel?
Personally, I think he should. But it's Djokovic's prerogative, like it is everyone, what he puts into his body. But personally, I think he should.
OK, Barry Flatman there. Thank you very much. Tennis correspondent at the Sunday Times. Also joining me now is Sam Dowler, broadcaster. Sam, thank you for joining us. I'm guessing, but what do you think your stance is on this? Should he take the vaccine in order to travel and play the game?
Yes, I do think he should. At the end of the day, this isn't about him. It's not about tennis. It's about the CDC. They re-looked at all of their rules and regulations literally yesterday or the day before. He shouldn't get special dispensation just because he's a celebrity. He's super rich. He's made a point of not taking the vaccination, and he went and did, as your previous guest said, a whole tour, didn't bother taking it, and has and takes advice from some sort of shaman on his YouTube when this is about a real world pandemic. Sorry,
I don't think that's fair. I'm sure he's consulted many scientists, medical professionals, etc. We don't know where he's got his advice from, but he'll be playing against other unvaccinated citizens. That's the crux of the matter here. So how is that unfair?
Well, at the end of the day, it isn't about fair or unfair. We all had to, deal with rules and regulations throughout the pandemic, all of us, including him. And at the moment, that is the CDC's rules, so he should have to abide by them, whether or not he's playing against unvaccinated people or not. That's the rules. I mean, we all went on and on and on about Boris Johnson breaking the rules, and here we are saying that he should be allowed to break the rules. No.
Surely we can see the difference between rules of partying at work and having a medical procedure that you don't agree with. Surely you can see here that he's being principled by not taking it.
To be honest with you, whether or not I think he should have a vaccination or not is irrelevant. The point is that is the rules, and if he doesn't want to take the vaccine and thereby break these rules, he should be allowed to play. We all have had to do it. We've all had to make sacrifices, and so should he as well. If he wants to take the vaccination and go and play, then do it. But if he doesn't, then he can't. End of.
Sam Dowler, broadcaster and journalist there. I entirely disagree, but it's always a pleasure to hear your thoughts. Let's have a quick look at what you've been saying. Paul has emailed in saying it's ridiculous. Even when vaccinated, you can still get COVID and pass it on. This is complete nonsense from the US government. Angela says, why not? It's well known now that it does nothing to protect others from catching COVID or even preventing those vaccinated from catching it. The only remaining claim is it could reduce the severity of one's illness. Well, you make a good point there. Benji says the US is a sovereign country and can choose to let in whoever it wants to. Indeed, Raj says, I bet Federer and Nadal would vote no. This is the issue, isn't it? Should he be given the choice of bodily autonomy, or should he play along with the rules of the US? Let us know your thoughts. Please continue to email in, tweet us at GBNews. You are with Calvin Robinson covering for Nana this week on GB News on TV and on digital radio. And after the break, we'll continue the great British debate. I am asking, should Novak Djokovic be allowed to play at the US Open? You'll hear my thoughts and the thoughts of my panel, consultant editor at the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and Conservative councillor, Claire Purcell. First, it's the latest news and headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 4:32. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. As we've been hearing, energy bills will rise by more than 80% from October, with Ofgem announcing the price cap will increase from just under £2,000 to over £3,500. Prime Minister Boris Johnson says the government has a plan to help struggling households over the coming months.
The pipeline of cash stretches out throughout the autumn. So there's going to be another £650 coming for every one of the 8 million most vulnerable households in October. In November, another £300 to help every pensioner, £150 extra for everybody who is entitled to disability benefits, on top of what we're doing with universal credit and the living wage, lifting both of those up.
£500,000 in support has been announced following the shooting of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool. A 36-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder. Home Secretary Priti Patel, who visited the scene, says a package of measures will help both the community and the police. Royal Mail's chief executive has apologised to customers for a disrupted service following today's industrial action. More than 100,000 postal staff have walked off the job in a dispute over wages. The Communication Workers Union, which is demanding a pay rise that's more in line with inflation, says it's the biggest strike in the UK since 2009. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Nana Akua with Calvin Robinson.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're with Calvin Robinson covering for Nana this week on GB News on TV and on digital radio. Back to our great British debate. This hour I'm asking, should Djokovic be allowed to play in the US Open? Tennis legend Novak Djokovic has been denied entry to the United States over his vaccination status, so he won't be able to compete in this year's US Open. The 21 Grand Slam champion has previously said that he would not get jabbed, even if it meant that he would miss out on winning trophies. The tennis star's defiant attitude towards vaccines could scupper his chances of being known as the best tennis player of all time in the men's game. Countries around the world have relaxed COVID rules, begging the question whether it's time for the states to start playing catch-up. So for the great British debate this hour, I am asking, should Djokovic be allowed to play in the US Open? Let's see what my panel make of this. I'm joined by consultant editor for the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and Conservative councillor Claire Pearsall. Is it Pearsall or Pearsall? I've tried to pronounce it both ways.
Yes, no, Pearsall.
Pearsall. What are your thoughts, Claire?
Right, no. Okay. The rules state that he needs to be vaccinated in order to go in.
But are the rules fair?
Well, that's a wholly different question, isn't it? Okay, these are the rules. So he knows what they are. Mm-hmm. He knew that places like Australia also wouldn't accept him, and he has chosen to not take the vaccination. Absolutely fine. That is his choice to do so. I wouldn't force anybody to have it. But you have to understand there are consequences. Now, whether it is right or wrong for the US to have it is a totally different argument. I think that they perhaps need to look at relaxing their restrictions, especially as you've already stated that there are American players who could be unvaccinated and they are allowed to play. So I think the Americans need to have a look at their own rules to make sure that they are sufficient for their country. But, he did know, and I think the arrogance of Novak Djokovic is entirely his problem. And I don't think that he can suggest that it's the Americans' problem when he knew what the risks were all the way along. So he needs to take responsibility for that. And I'm sure that other players, rather than saying, oh dear, what a shame, are actually looking forward to having a competition where they may triumph.
OK, Andrew, is this a man who is arrogant, or is this a man who is sticking up for his principles and fighting for bodily autonomy?
I think he's idiotic. Look, he's one of the most famous, charismatic sportsmen on the planet. He's a huge role model to millions and millions of people. And I'm afraid rules are rules, and you can't break them just because you're Novak Djokovic, who's desperate to overtake Rafa Nadal and become the world's #1 tennis player. All it is a simple jab in the arm. What's the big deal? And I know where he gets a lot of this from. No, Gary, let me tell you.
That's terrible, Andrew.
I've read what his wife has said
that.
about this.
Right.
I've read what his wife has said about this. And I'm sure they talk a lot, husband and wives. Obviously, they're very close. They've got children and all that stuff. She says the whole of COVID is linked to the 5G mask.
Doesn't matter what his reason.
We don't want all that hocus pocus.
Oh, come on! Look, there's two things there.
No. So, but I agree. But what I do agree is hypocritical is that there will be players who could even lift this trophy in the next 2 weeks. Americans who haven't been jabbed. Now that is going to put the United States in a very difficult position because I think they should be. Each player should be asked in the post-match press conference, "Have you been vaccinated?" Because if you then discover the guy who gets in the semi-finals hasn't, that's going to make the Americans change the rules pretty quickly because these rules are ridiculous. But they are the rules, which is why he's got to follow them.
Right, I'm going to come back to you both because I need to provide some balance here, and I'm happy to do so. Rules are rules. You've both said that rules are rules. Rules are not just rules. If there is a rule that is immoral, we have a moral duty to disobey that rule. And in terms of it's just a jab, just take it. Look, if you believe in the vaccine, that's fine. Other people don't believe in it, but that's just beside the point. You should not be encouraged to take a vaccine for the sake of entering a game. Now, if you believe that it works to protect your health, take it for that reason. Do not be encouraged or compelled to take it for any other reason. And to say that he's desperate to win and desperate to if he's desperate, he would have done it. He would have disobeyed his moral stance.
He won Wimbledon this year. He'll carry on playing. He is. How much is he worth? Why won't he tell us his objections to this jab? That's the
Why
other
should
thing.
he have to?
I think he should.
It's his bodily autonomy.
No, Calvin, he's a very public figure.
Yeah.
At the time when he was not allowed into Australia, COVID was still a big problem in a lot of countries, and he refused to discuss it. He should discuss
No one should have to discuss the medical status with anybody.
You do if you're one of the world's most famous sportsmen and you're being banned from entering a country. Tell us what your problem is, because then people may have more understanding.
But that's mob rule, isn't it? And this is part of the problem. I think a lot of the reason why people...
He's got a duty because of who he is.
A lot of the reason people are unhappy with him isn't because he's breaking the rules or not going along with the rules. It's because he's breaking the social code that we've all said you have to take the vaccine, otherwise you're a bad person. It's cultural. It's not rooted in science.
No, I disagree with that. I think it's entirely his choice, and I do agree with you. And let's put the jab thing to one side. It is his choice to not have it, but then to sit there and complain that you cannot go to a competition, you cannot enter a country when you knew full well that was going to be the consequence, it's a wholly different argument.
But is it not discrimination?
No, it's not discrimination. Those are the rules of the country. Every country has their own border controls. You can agree or disagree with them all you like. It doesn't make them immoral. It doesn't make them wrong. It is what it is. And he knew that. So I think that he needs to take responsibility. I don't think he needs to discuss his reasons for doing it. I really don't, unless there is something that perhaps we've never heard before.
Well, that could be interesting.
Well, let's not look at his reason for not taking it. Let's look at the reasons for having to take it. Why do you think the US government still demands people are vaccinated to enter their country when they're playing a game against people that aren't vaccinated? How does that make any sense logically?
Well, I don't think. I think that misses the point.
No, this is part of the point.
Well, but if
they have to address all parts of it.
Because look, it's a very big country, lots of different states, but they've taken this decision. They've got a president who we think may have just had COVID very recently. We're not sure. I don't know why they didn't tell us if he had or he hadn't. It could be that he's just doddery and useless. Oh yeah, we know that already. But there is a suggestion he had COVID as well. But
among other things.
But I still think are we saying we should make an exception for Novak Djokovic? Because of who he is.
Elite sportmen get exceptions all the time, but I'm not saying that you should get an exception. I'm saying the rule itself is wrong and should be changed.
What the United States are treating everybody the same who's coming into that country, whether they're a top-ranked tennis player or number 950 in the world who nobody's ever heard of. It's the same rules.
But is it a good rule?
He thinks it should be different for him.
You won't answer the question whether you think the rule should be changed.
I think the rule is mad when you consider that homegrown players don't have to be vaccinated.
Absolutely.
Which is why I would,
discriminatory,
at every press conference, I would ask these players, have you been jabbed? And if they won't tell us why, you have a big discussion.
We can't keep asking people for their medical history. It's inappropriate, it's immoral.
Look, the vaccination programme was rolled out in a very public way in this country and in every other country. President Biden had his jab in public. So did Boris Johnson.
That normalises it, but I shouldn't be able to ask you your medical history, nor should I be able to ask yours on any.
You can ask
on any
if I've
issue.
been jabbed. I've had all three.
Why is COVID different to anything else?
Because it was a new thing.
Have you had an STD
scary.
recently, Andrew?
Have I what?
Had an STD recently?
No.
Okay, is that an inappropriate question?
No, because it's different. Because this was a pandemic that took the world by surprise and whipped around the world in record time and killed tens of thousands of people in a way we didn't know.
Agree to disagree, because this show is nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome one of our great British voices. This is your opportunity to get involved in the show and tell us what you think about the topics we're discussing. This hour, we're heading over to Grimsby. We're going to speak with GB viewer Alan McNeilly. Alan, welcome to the show. Please tell us, what do you think? Should Djokovic be allowed to enter the US and play in the Open?
Good afternoon, Kelvin. Congratulations, by the way, on your ordination.
Thank you.
I don't think there's any reason why he shouldn't be able to get into the US. There was lots of exceptions made for people travelling who were businessmen, who were politicians during the height of the pandemic. So what threat does he pose? If he takes a test, he tests negative, why shouldn't he get in?
That's a very good question. Exceptions have already been made, so why not for elite sportsmen too? Do you think this is going to scupper his chances?
Well, I don't think the United States will let him in because of the nature of their policy, and it's up to them what policy that they run. But if you think about what was going on with the Canadian truckers, they weren't going to be allowed to cross the border, were they, unless they'd had the vaccination? Yeah. So it's part and parcel of the same narrative that you must comply.
And so do you think he has a duty to fight back and not comply?
I think it's entirely up to him whether he wants the vaccine or not. If he doesn't want to take it and the government or the US government don't want to shift, there's not really a lot he can do about it at the end of the day. That's down to the rules, as your commentators were saying. Rules is rules, as we say. But I think it's a bit of a nonsense, particularly as we've moved on from the very serious variants of COVID into Omicron, which seems to be, nothing worse than a bit of a cold.
It seems there are no exceptions at the moment for people entering the US if they haven't had the vaccine. Alan, do you think that it's an unfair rule for foreigners entering the US to have the vaccine, whereas American citizens can have it or not have it and still play in the Open?
Yeah, I think it's rather stupid at this stage, because if the Americans wanted to check people coming in for possibly carrying COVID, then they could quite easily ask them to take a test before they arrived. That should be sufficient to allow them to enter the country, whether or not they're vaccinated. The vaccines themselves, how long do they last? 12 weeks? 15 weeks? That period of time seems to change on a regular basis. So vaccines that I've had my 3 shots. Are they of any use to me now? Well, it seems that most of the people who had the vaccine are the people who are catching COVID now.
You make some good points, Alan McNeilly there from Grimsby. Thank you very much for joining the show today. Now I'm asking, should Djokovic be allowed to play in the US Open? Lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. We've got an email from Martin here who says it should always remain a personal choice and the government should never force it upon anyone. Next, we will be banned from venues for not having the MMR jab. This is ridiculous. I tend to agree with you there, Martin. William says, of course he should be allowed to play. This is pure political theatre. Politics should never come into sport. Hear, hear. If it's making a difference, fine. But if it's just politics, what's the point? Lou says, Djokovic is a hero to us all as he refused to become a subservient sheep. He maintains the fight to ensure people have autonomy over their body. God bless Novak Djokovic. God bless him indeed. Donna says, I am glad the US government have stuck to its guns. In my opinion, he has won enough titles to last a lifetime. It will be a good opportunity for gifted young stars to have an opportunity to rise through the ranks. Okay, so let's use the vaccine status to give someone else a shot, eh? Bob says, I say just follow the rules like everyone else. Why would the American government make an exception just for him? It's not very fair on others who are refused entry, and whether I agree or disagree with the actual rule is immaterial. Sam got in touch to say, through the US government's stupidity, the world will miss out on some excellent tennis. This is a dreadful decision. Well, let us know what you think. There's a poll up on Twitter today throughout the show asking, should Djokovic be allowed to play at the US Open? Currently, 80% of you say yes. So I think the viewers are falling in line with us. Well, I say us.
With you.
I like your notebook, by the way. I think that pretty much says it all. My list of things I was right about. You are with Calvin Robinson covering for Nana this week on GB News on your TV, on your digital radio, and we'll be back after the break. We're going to be presenting a new treatment for IBS and numerous other stomach issues that have been further proven effective by Norwegian doctors. I'll be joined by a doctor to explain. But first, here's that break.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're with Calvin Robinson covering for Nana. And in her words, if you're just tuning in, where have you been? We're watching GB News, or we're on GB News TV and on radio. A Norwegian study now has been looking into a rather promising result for people who suffer from IBS. Up to 75% of patients suffering from irritable bowel syndrome have reported fewer symptoms after receiving a fecal transplant from a healthy donor. Yes, that is what you think it is. Some researchers believe microbial transplantations could help be the key to treating more generalized stomach complaints. IBS costs the NHS almost £12 million a year, so this pioneering research could help save the pennies in the UK taxpayers' pockets as well. Now, I'm joined by consultant physician and, excuse me in the pronunciation of this, gastroenterological Dr. Simon Smale. Did I get that right?
Gastroenterologist.
Thank you. I won't pronounce it again. Could you, in layman's terms for me, Doctor, please break this down? What is this science behind this procedure?
Okay. So we all have about 10 trillion organisms or bugs living within our guts, predominantly in our large bowel. And those bugs influence the way our guts work, but also influence our mood, our behavior, and a number of things around our immune system and our endocrine system as well. And people with IBS have, if you like, some dysfunctional disorder. They have a different array of bugs compared to people with normal bugs. And the thinking, therefore, is that because those bugs play a pivotal role in the way the gut works, that by giving or restoring normal bugs into these people, you would restore normal bowel function. And so what they've done with this study is they've basically screened individuals, very much like we screen blood donors, taken the stools from healthy individuals and emulsified them, so made them into a slurry, if you like, and then transferred those stools into individuals suffering from irritable bowel, and compared that to those people having what we call a control, so in other words, no active ingredient. And they found that they had a response in as much as up to 75% of people, 2/3 of people, improved, and their improvement was sustained. Now, that's one of a number of studies, and I think it's still early days. And I think in the long term, we need to do more research. But it's without doubt true that the bugs that we live with have an enormous influence, not just on our guts, but on our health and disease and our behaviours generally.
I've got to pull you up on the research because I can't find anything anywhere. It says 75% of people were successful in getting benefits from this treatment, but 75% of how many, do you know?
So the relatively small numbers, I can't remember the exact numbers in the study, but it's hundreds rather than millions. And one always tends to find that in research studies, you are selecting a very well-defined group of individuals who are perfect for a study, if you like.
Yeah.
And in the real world, it's fair to say that things are tend not to be quite that good. The other thing to say is that it's likely that there are a small number of bugs that are influencing the symptoms in irritable bowel, a relatively small number of bugs. So there might be 1,000 species living in the average gut, and it may only be 10 or 20 or 30 species that are actually influencing the development of irritable bowel. And those species essentially are having their effect by virtue of the products that they are making when they metabolize what's left of our food. So I think at the moment we're looking at transplanting feces, or the emulsification of feces, which contain perhaps hundreds or thousands of species. And I think as we refine this, we may get to a stage where we're actually saying this individual's missing these particular bugs, and we would give these particular bugs in order to correct the individual's abnormalities or dysfunctions. We're not yet at that level of complexity. We don't yet understand the very challenging computational biology about why certain individuals have certain bugs and why others don't, and how we can influence that. Those things are still very much in the research forum.
Well, I was going to ask you, in terms of good bugs, bad bugs, or good bacteria, bad bacteria, does our diet have a dramatic impact on this?
So it does have an impact. The biggest impact is actually our mums and the bugs our mums give us. So most of us acquire most of our bugs in the first year of life. And you start acquiring bugs as you're being delivered. So the vaginal canal, if you have a normal delivery, is full of organisms, lactobacilli, that then set up your gut for the development of a more healthy microbiome going forward. So the colon becomes a bit acidic, and the weak acid then encourages the growth of bifidobacterium, which are other healthy bacteria. But all of these bacteria, all of these species are in balance. So it's like, if you like, it's like the ecosystem of a forest. There may be hundreds of different plants and different animals and different fungi living in the forest, and yet we are kind of trying to replace the whole forest by giving a fecal transplant with seeds from the whole forest, rather than just giving the flowers that we want to grow. And in time, I think we'll get to a stage where we go, we're missing these flowers, we'll put these flowers into people's colons. Flowers.
It sounds like it has a lot of potential, Dr. Smale. Could this be the gateway to curing other diseases such as Crohn's?
So that's a really good question. We already know that we believe that things like Crohn's and inflammatory bowel disease are an abnormality of the way in which our own immune system interacts with the contents of our guts, particularly what we eat and the bugs that live there. And we know that there are some bugs that decline in numbers just before you relapse. And as you're getting better, those bugs come back into numbers. We don't know if that's because the bugs are causing the relapse or because the bugs are declining as a result of the relapse. But it's a really exciting prospect that we might be able to improve all sorts of not just gastrointestinal disease, but also, for example, depression and anxiety by influencing the microbiome. So there is already a commercially available bug which has been demonstrated to improve resilience in people with anxiety and indeed in elite athletes.
That sounds
so that's
very helpful.
fascinating. Yeah.
Dr. Smale, thank you so much for that. Sounds very helpful for the future. Consultant physician and gastroenterologist. You're watching Calvin Robinson covering for Nana this week on GB News. More to come in the next hour. You're with Calvin Robinson covering for Nana this week on GB News on TV and on digital radio. For the next hour, me and my panel will be talking about some big topics hitting the news headlines right now. But first, let's get the latest headlines from Titania.
Thank you, Calvin. Good afternoon. It's 5 o'clock. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. Households struggling with the cost of living are now facing an 80% hike in their energy bills. Ofgem has announced the price cap will increase from just under £2,000 to over £3,500 in October. The government has acknowledged the rise will cause stress for many, but Prime Minister Boris Johnson says help is coming.
The pipeline of cash stretches out throughout the autumn. So there's going to be another £650 coming for every one of the 8 million most vulnerable households in October. In November, another £300 to help every pensioner, £150 extra for everybody who is entitled to disability benefits, on top of what we're doing with universal credit and the living wage, lifting both of those up.
Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says more focus needs to be on the energy companies and what they can do to alleviate the pain.
We need to have a freeze on those energy prices. Do not let them go up to those levels, and pay for that in part by a windfall tax on the oil and gas companies on those excess profits. Meanwhile, you've got a government that is missing in action. And I think most people looking in today would say that is unforgivable from the government in the middle of a cost of living crisis.
£500,000 in support has been announced for Liverpool following the shooting of Olivia Pratt-Corbell. A 36-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murdering the 9-year-old who was shot in her home on Monday night. Home Secretary Priti Patel says a package of measures will help both the community and also the police. A man has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 23 years and 4 months for the murder of Lily Sullivan in Pembroke. Lewis Haynes was caught on CCTV with the teenager on the night she was killed, just before Christmas last year. The 31-year-old strangled Lily after she rebuffed his advances and left her body in a reservoir. DCI Richard Yelland hopes the sentence will go some way in helping her family and friends rebuild their lives.
Lewis Haynes passed numerous opportunities to seek help when fleeing the scene of his crime. The life sentence handed down to Lewis Haynes today ensures that he will not be able to freely harm others in the community. Dyfed-Powys Police and our partnership will continue to work tirelessly to bring to justice those who perpetrate violence against women and girls in all its forms. This sentencing is no consolation for the family and friends of Lily, but I hope this will be a step forward in the slow process of rebuilding their lives.
The number of people crossing the English Channel in small boats this year has passed 24,000. Ministry of Defence figures show that more than 800 migrants crossed in 16 small boats yesterday, the second busiest day of the year so far. That as the cost of the UK's asylum system topped £2 billion a year for the first time, following the highest number of claims in 2 decades. Over 900 people have been killed in Pakistan in floods that have affected more than 30 million people over the last few weeks. The country's climate minister has called it a humanitarian disaster of epic proportions and says the heavy rainfall is climate-induced. Pakistan's urging the international community to help with relief efforts as it struggles with the aftermath. The US pharmaceutical company Moderna is suing Pfizer and BioNTech for allegedly copying their COVID vaccine technology. Moderna is accusing the US-German company, saying the mRNA technology that they developed before the pandemic was copied. Moderna says it patented the technology between 2010 and 2016, years before the pandemic. Royal Mail's chief executive has apologised to customers for a disrupted service following today's industrial action. More than 100,000 postal staff have walked off the job in a dispute over pay. It's the first of 4 days of strikes, with more being held on the 31st, as well as next month on the 8th and the 9th. The Communication Workers Union, which is demanding a pay rise that's more in line with inflation, says it's the biggest strike in the UK since 2009. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Nana Akua with Calvin Robinson.
Thanks, Tatiana. This is GB News. I'm Calvin Robinson, covering for Nana this week. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times disagreeing, but no one will be cancelled. Joining me today, it's consultant editor at the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and Conservative councillor Claire Pearsall. Still to come. In just a moment, it's Friday Focus, and today I'm shining a spotlight on Pakistani Muslim child rape gangs. How on earth has Rotherham, the town at the centre of one of Britain's most notorious child sex scandals, been named as the country's first children's capital of culture? I'll be joined by a survivor of grooming and child rape to discuss her thoughts. And in the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should traditional GCSEs and A-levels be scrapped? A study conducted by the Tony Blair Institute has suggested that the current education system should be scrapped in favour of new qualifications aiming to improve social mobility. The report stated that the current educational landscape in England relies on direct instruction and memorising, but is completely scrapping the current system really the way forward? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. A town at the centre of one of Britain's most notorious child sex scandals has been named the country's first children's capital of culture. Rotherham in South Yorkshire has been selected to be the inaugural Children's Capital of Culture in 2025, described by local authority as 365 extraordinary days of imagination, creativity and community, packed with music, dance, films and food. But with reports estimating that 1,400 children were sexually abused in Rotherham between 1997 and 2013, some are critical of the town being awarded the Children's Capital of Culture in 2025. I'm joined by columnist Samantha Smith and social policy analyst Dr. Rakib Ehsan. Thank you both for joining me. I think I'll start with you, Samantha, if you don't mind. If you could let us know, how do you think this makes other victims like yourself feel when Rotherham is becoming the UK's first ever Children's Capital of Culture?
Frankly, I think it's an insult to those who have suffered for decades as a result of the silence, ignorance and incompetence of the local council, police, social services, schools. Those victims in Rotherham, an estimated 1,400 across 2 decades, were frankly ignored by a local council that couldn't care less about young white working class girls being raped by predominantly Pakistani men. So for them to now be claiming that Rotherham is a capital for children's culture and is this welcoming beacon of progressivism is laughable.
And Dr. Rakib, how does a town like Rotherham get shortlisted for these sorts of programmes of funding in the first place?
Well, I think that firstly, there'll be many people who would have listened to the news that Rotherham being in this position is quite remarkable considering its history. When you look at it on the surface, the programme in itself is not a bad one. It's going to be a 10-day event. It's about heightening children and young people's civic participation. There's this talk about it creating life-changing cultural, social and economic opportunities. The issue here, Calvin, really is the fact that it's Rotherham Borough Council which is in the position of leading this project, which is going to involve children, young people, local businesses, cultural institutions, civic institutions. I think it's ultimately it's the fact that Rotherham is at the heart of Britain's grooming gangs crisis. It's at the heart of that decades-long story of group-based child sexual exploitation. And it's the fact that the local authority, well, the borough council at the heart of that scandal is now in the position of leading on this project, which is ultimately about children's and young people's civic participation.
Absolutely. So I do need to specify it's British Pakistani Muslim men. But the fact that I have to specify that is part of the problem itself. Do you think that this is a case of people being afraid of addressing this issue due to being labelled a racist? And is it a case of the Labour Party pandering to what they perceive to be a block vote? And I'll start with you on that one, Rakib, if you don't mind.
Well, I mean, I think that many of our public institutions, they're paralysed by this culture of political correctness and multicultural ideology. That diversity is inherently seen as a positive without understanding the complications that come with that. When it comes to group-based child sexual exploitation, this isn't just Rotherham. Samantha's obviously talked a great deal about Telford. But there's many localities across Britain where this is a very serious problem, where you have public institutions who, it's not just about political correctness, there's a victim-blaming culture which has taken hold in those institutions, where ultimately predominantly white working class girls, they've almost been seen as being deserving of this kind of, this child sexual abuse that they've experienced. And there's local councils and police forces which have simply not taken this issue seriously at all.
I want to address that matter, actually, if I can come to you, Samantha. After your horrible abuse, you spoke to child services, you spoke to social services and the police. How did they interact with you? Was that a positive experience for you? Or was that helpful for you in any way?
I've spoke about it on GBNews a fair bit, but I would say that the local council couldn't have cared less about kids like me. The only culture in towns like Rotherham, Telford, Oldham is one of ignorance, victim blaming, and a complete lack of understanding or empathy for children that have been through so much in their lives. And let's be clear here. This isn't, this isn't about perpetrating discrimination against British Pakistani Muslims. This is about thousands upon thousands of little girls, children, not child prostitutes, not madams, not young women, children being systematically groomed, raped, abused, exploited, and even murdered by adult men. And councils, local authorities, and those in positions of power turning a blind eye for decades. I think that Rotherham Borough Council have some cheek claiming to now be representing children and to be furthering their opportunities for success and prosperity when they actively ignored and shut the doors on thousands of vulnerable girls. The only culture that Rotherham should be known for is the culture of grooming in their town, and those in the positions of power shouldn't be awarded accolades. They should be held to account. They should be thrown in jail, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, so I don't think we can confirm any of them were murdered, but this money, people will say it's supposed to be an incentive and not a reward. If that's the case, where could this money be spent that would help improve the situation, Dr. Rakib?
Well, I think that, to my understanding, there's going to be funding in the region of £1.4 million from the UK government for this particular programme. There's going to be external funding from Arts Council England, I think South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority, and I think even the European Regional Development Fund. In my view, though, I do think that when it comes to Rotherham, there has to be an emphasis on child safeguarding and protection. I think that if there were problems in those processes, there needs to be greater investment in that to begin with. And then you can have that discussion about creating more life-changing cultural, social and cultural opportunities. I think that the bread and butter of maximising child protection, especially for young people most at risk of group-based child sexual exploitation, should be Rotherham Borough Council's priority. And then when it comes to the money that's being received for this programme, once that's done, and that's been significantly improved, then you can talk about investing in young people's opportunities. Because at the moment, this particular part of the country has failed young people spectacularly when it comes to protecting them, especially the most vulnerable.
Rotherham Council have confirmed that's where they intend for the money to go. But do these services need a good overhaul before we can dump more money into them? If the police, the councils, the local and national governments were all complicit in the cover-up of these crimes, as per the report by Baroness J, do these services not need a complete and utter overhaul before spending more money on them? What's your stance on this, Samantha?
But I would say, as in the Telford report that was released earlier this month, the conclusions were very similar to that of Rotherham, Greater Manchester, of all of these other areas that have had child sexual exploitation scandals. It was stated in no uncertain terms that police, local councils and social services failed to act due to quote-unquote nervousness about race, and that they had failed in their most basic job of investigating purported incidents of child sexual abuse and rape, and that they had in some cases actively encouraged those in positions of care to not report potential sexual abuse against children because they didn't want to be labelled racist. In order for Rotherham Borough Council to be able to stand as a beacon of children's culture and child safeguarding, they need to first take a long, hard look in the mirror and acknowledge responsibility for their failings over decades, because this isn't a drop in the pond. This is an entire ocean of failings that they oversaw for years upon years upon years. And now, I mean, we recently saw a video from Oldham Council of the leader of the council, Labour leader of the council, saying that the children who had been victims of child sexual exploitation hadn't had their lives ruined. That you can't say that, trying to downplay the abuse that they suffered. So long as councils continue to try and brush it under the rug, sweep it under the carpet, and minimise the part that they played in the cover-up of child sexual exploitation in their areas, they can't claim to represent or...
On that point, a spokesman from Rotherham Council has said the Children's Capital of Culture initiative was devised by young people in Rotherham in 2017 and is being supported by the council and a range of businesses and organisations across the borough. The council has not received any more recent contact from the government about this at the present time, so we are unable to comment further. And Julie Dalton of the Children's Capital of Culture Programme Board said, "It's the boldest demonstration of Rotherham's commitment to empowering children and young people to have a voice and play an active role in its future." Now, Dr. Rakib, do you think this will have the desired effect? Is this going to be a voice to the young people that have been damaged by these institutions?
I'd be very interested to know how many of the young people that are involved in that consultation process were victims of group-based child sexual exploitation. Firstly, I'd be very interested in that. I think that Rotherham Borough Council needs to show a bit more humility, to be honest, when it comes to this particular programme. That means being very open about its own failings when it comes to the decades-long group-based child sexual exploitation which has taken place in the town, as was discussed in the 2014 J report. But I think more broadly, as you said, Calvin, I think as well as investing money in child protection, I think there needs to be a radical overhaul of those processes. There needs to be a discussion about the culture within the council itself and South Yorkshire Police Force. I saw a very recent report which showed that South Yorkshire was one of the worst police forces when it came to recording the ethnicity of perpetrators when it comes to child sexual abuse. So I think it's very clear that the public institutions there's still much room for improvement in this particular area. So I think before this programme, there needs to be a very clear acknowledgement by the Rotherham Borough Council about all the failings in the past. And then we can talk about expanding opportunities for young people in that particular part of the country.
Spot on. Samantha, there will be those that say we need to look to the future and stop looking to the past. What would you say we need to get to before we can get to that point?
Those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And Rotherham Borough Council, in claiming so boldly to be committed to empowering young people and giving them a voice, seem to be forgetting that they actively stifled young people's voices for decades when they tried to speak out about the sexual abuse that they were suffering. I think that Dr. Rakib is absolutely correct in the fact that councils like Rotherham, Telford, Greater Manchester need to show a great deal more humility when discussing their past failings, and remember that they were complicit in one of the worst child grooming scandals in British history. we can't simply forget that these thousands of girls, because for girls like me, for girls who have suffered sexual abuse, grooming, anything similar to the group-based grooming that we saw in Rotherham, it doesn't go away. It's with you. It sticks with you for life. And councils may be able to brush it under the carpet and forget it in the next election cycle, but girls deserve to be heard. They deserve to have their stories remembered, and they deserve to have change enacted.
OK, thank you very much for that touching take. Thank you both for your participation. That was columnist Samantha Smith and social policy analyst Dr. Rakib Ehsan. Coming up, it's the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, should traditional GCSEs and A-levels be scrapped? A study conducted by the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change has suggested that the current education system should be scrapped in favour of new qualifications that better prepare school leavers for the workplace. The report stated that the current educational landscape in England relies on direct instruction and memorising, but is completely scrapping the current system really the way forward. That's coming up. But first, just in case it's changed in the last hour, here's the weather forecast.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update. A bank holiday weekend for much of the UK, and most places are going to have a dry 3 days with sunny spells as well. Feeling quite pleasant in the sunny spells as well, certainly on Saturday and Sunday. There's high pressure nearby and it will be building in for the weekend, but for the time being we do have this old weather front that's providing quite a few showers out there through this evening over parts of Wales and southern Scotland, one or two heavy ones over southwest Scotland, tending to ease off as we go through the evening, and overnight most of us will have a dry night with clear spells. Could just turn a little misty once more across East Anglia in the southeast, one or two fog patches here. Still quite warm here, but elsewhere a reasonably comfortable night, and certainly across the northwest temperatures well down into single figures in rural areas. So a coolish start here, but generally a sunny start. Most places having a fine bright day on Saturday. Not everywhere dry. There will still be one or two showers scattered across northern England, one or two for the Midlands, maybe one or two in the south as well. But as I said, most places won't see those showers stay dry. A little warmer as well, temperatures in the south in the mid-20s, further north, high teens or low 20s. Thickening cloud in the northwest will bring a bit of patchy rain to northern parts of Northern Ireland and western Scotland during Saturday evening, but elsewhere, any showers disappearing for most dry and clear nights, and again, reasonably comfortable, although temperatures will start off in the teens as we head into Sunday. Again, Sunday, for the vast majority, dry and bright with sunny spells. Early cloud across the northwest. That should tend to drift away as we go through the day. Perhaps a bit more cloud across northeastern parts of England. Again, one or two isolated showers come the afternoon, but for the vast majority, dry and a little warmer. Temperatures more widely over 20 Celsius, mid-20s quite widely across the south. The breeze just picking up a little bit along the south coast. That will be a feature of Monday's weather. Quite a strong wind along the south coast, a little cooler in the east, but more sunny spells.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
You're with Calvin Robinson covering for Nana this week on GB News, on TV and on digital radio. It's time for our great British debate this hour. I'm asking, should traditional GCSEs and A-levels be scrapped? A study conducted by the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change has suggested that the current education system should be scrapped in favour of new qualifications aiming to improve social mobility. The report says the current educational landscape in England relies too heavily on passive forms of learning, which is focused on direct instruction and memorising. The Institute says that our education system needs to have more emphasis on what it calls the 4 Cs: critical thinking, creativity, communication, and collaborative problem solving. It added that the 4 Cs would help future students to compete in a work environment that's becoming increasingly shaped by automation and artificial intelligence. But is completely scrapping the current system really the way forward? So for the great British debate this hour, I'm asking, should traditional GCSEs and A-levels be scrapped? I'm joined now by former chairman of examining bodies on A-levels, Dr. Tony Breslin. Dr. Tony, thank you so much for joining me. We hear this question every single year, don't we? When the GCSE and the A-level results come out, should we replace examinations with something more creative? What are your thoughts?
I think you're right, Calvin. This is a kind of annual debate slash obsession. Our current system, the A-levels have their origins in the 1950s, the O-levels that followed them a little bit later, and the GCSE reforms in the 1980s. And the reforms that were led by Michael Gove 5 or 6 years ago, those reforms took us back to a very knowledge-based 1950s, 1960s kind of model. I think we've got to ask the question, are there many things that we did in the 1950s or 60s that we would still do in the same way today? There are very, very few, but examinations are one of them. However, I don't think the solution is to kind of slash and burn and think again.
So some of us would say, you know, I'm a former teacher and assistant head teacher myself. Some of us would say Michael Gove's reforms were actually the best thing in education in a long, long time. And a focus on a knowledge-rich traditional education is a good thing. You know, the Tony Blair Institute said that memorising and direct instruction are something we need to move away from. Surely, if we are here to educate the next generation and impart knowledge, memorising facts and imparting knowledge is exactly what we should be doing.
Yes, look, I think we have to find the right balance on this. And that's why I don't think the Blair report is right in saying, let's sweep it all away. Let's, you know, go completely to skills. Let's move away from knowledge. But let's strike the balance better. And I think one of the things that's really interesting is that the 2 years before this year, of course, we didn't have written examinations. And initially, people suggested and commentators suggested that there had been grade inflation. And the insinuation was that marking was soft. Actually, what I want to suggest is that's not the case. What happened was that young people, although they weren't assessed for 2 or 3 hours in an exam hall, were assessed in a much richer range of ways, and therefore more children succeeded. So I don't think we should be saying exams or no exams. I don't think we should be saying knowledge or skills. I think we should be striking the balance between the two. So let's have some portfolio-based assessment. Let's have some unseen examinations in the exam hall. And let's make sure that the curriculum that we teach both carries forward the best aspects of our society and educates young people about that, but also prepares them for the future, and a future that is so unpredictable. So transferable skills and the ability to reapply, in a sense, old knowledge in new settings is going to be vital.
Well, schools already do continued assessment throughout the school year, don't they? The problem with it is it's not uniform and it's kind of inconsistent between schools, and that's the problem we had over lockdown, isn't it? Surely an examination is the best shot or the least worst approach to give equality of opportunity, because everyone sits in an exam condition. The whole point of it is that everyone's in exactly the same setting. But that's the first question. The second question is, are we being too utilitarian about education here? Is the purpose of school isn't to set you up for the workplace, is it? It's to impart knowledge and to enrich our society.
Well, I agree with you on the second point. I'll try to take the first, then you might have to remind me of the second. They're really big issues. First of all, there is one of the things that has sustained exams for so long is the myth of meritocracy, that everybody's doing the exam at the same time, on the same day, in an exam hall. The problem is those exam halls are in very different schools, in very different communities, and those children come from very different settings. And every system in the world that relies on formal examinations alone reproduces the inequalities in that society. It doesn't level them.
I don't think there is a perfect solution, is there, Tony? We're going to have to agree on that, I think, at this point. There's no perfect solution, but exams are our least worst approach. That's Dr. Tony Breslin, former chairman of examining bodies for A-levels, and also the author of Lessons from Lockdown. We're also joined by Chris McGovern, another former head teacher and chairman of Real Education. Chris, you and I usually agree on a lot of these issues, but I think we're going to disagree on this one. I'm all for knowledge-rich and direct instruction and rote learning and examination halls. Why should we change that?
Calvin, if you go back to 1987, 1988, I was the first person in the world to oppose GCSE. I criticised it. I lost my job because I criticised the quality of GCSE. This was debated in Parliament. It was the front page story. So I am very critical of GCSE, but we do need examinations. And I think what we should probably be looking now towards is a GCSE at the age of 14. Then we would only be a year behind the Asia-Pacific countries, because at the moment we're about 3 years behind, according to the international statistics. And, you know, in the previous interviewee talked about the O-level disappearing. Well, of course, it hasn't disappeared, really. The O-level is sat in Singapore. One of our economic competitors uses an exam we ban in this country, but it's very solid. We do need exams, and we need to raise our standards, and we need to get better quality teaching. Tony Blair has said we've had improvement in education in the last 25 years, and if you look at that from the point of view of GCSE and A-level, we've had great improvement. But you don't see that in terms of international data. On international data, on international tests, we are falling behind. So yes, we've had improvement. Back in '88, only 8% of children got grade A. Now it's nearly 30%. So we've had massive improvement across the board, but it's fake improvement. These are fake exams. And, you know, a couple of years ago, the news headlines was to pass GCSE maths, you need 15%. So really, you know, a lower pass in GCSE, it's a level 4, or we used to be a C, is a certificate of incompetence in the subject. So you and I are not going to be so far apart. GCSE has been a disaster, but we do need exams. And whether we call it GCSE or not, it doesn't really matter. But we have to have exams, and we have to have them probably at 14 rather than 16, because at 14, probably children should be looking towards academic futures or vocational futures, and we shouldn't be so snobby about vocational, because it's equally important, possibly more important than academic. So that's where we would come from. We want testing, we need testing, and maybe at 14, but GCSE is a lousy
Chris
exam.
McGovern, I'm so happy to hear there was a lot more nuance there. We totally agree on it. I agree with you on everything you just said. Spot on. We need exams, but let's move the GCSEs down a bit and let's stop making them easier. That's Chris McGovern, former head teacher and chairman of Real Education. You are with Calvin Robinson, covering for Nana this week on GBNews, on TV and on digital radio. Coming up, we'll continue our great British debate, and I'm asking, should traditional GCSEs and A-levels be scrapped? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, consultant editor at the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and Conservative councillor Claire Pearsall. But first, the latest news headlines from Tatiana Sanchez.
Thank you, Calvin. It's 5:33. I am Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. Well, as we've been hearing, energy bills will rise by more than 80% from October, with Ofgem announcing the price cap will increase from just under £2,000 to over £3,500. Prime Minister Boris Johnson says the government has a plan to help struggling households over the coming months.
Pipeline of cash stretches out throughout the autumn. So there's going to be another £650 coming for every one of the 8 million most vulnerable households in October. In November, another £300 to help every pensioner, £150 extra for everybody who is entitled to disability benefits, on top of what we're doing with universal credit and the living wage, lifting both of those up.
£500,000 in support has been announced following the shooting of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool. A 36-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder. Home Secretary Priti Patel, who visited the scene, says a package of measures will help both the community and the police. Royal Mail's chief executive has apologised to customers for a disrupted service following today's industrial action. More than 100,000 postal staff have walked off the job in a dispute over wages. The Communication Workers Union, which is demanding a pay rise that's more in line with inflation, says it's the biggest strike in the UK since 2009. TV online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Nana Akua with Calvin Robinson.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Well, here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.178 and €1.178, and the price of gold currently stands at £1,474 and 42 pence per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. I'm Calvin Robinson covering for Nana this week, and this is GB News on your TV and on your digital radio. It's time for our great British debate this hour. I'm asking, should traditional GCSEs and A-levels be scrapped? A study conducted by the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change recommends that the current education system be scrapped. This would be in favour of new exams with qualifications aiming to improve social mobility. But is completely binning the current system really the way forward? So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should traditional GCSEs and A-levels be scrapped? Before I bring the panel in, so many of you have been getting in touch by email, so let's have a quick look at a few of these. Paul says, they no longer have any real value in today's society, and it shouldn't decide our futures. Results do not indicate you know more than anyone else. Actually, they do. Right now, practical knowledge would serve the nation more than any qualifications. We need people to learn skills. Indeed, we do, but you can't learn skills without the knowledge. John says, depends on what fits best. I think more discussions about this equals more understanding. Very good. It's a very nuanced subject to be black or white about it. And Ross says A-levels should be scrapped. For a 16-year-old to choose a subject that will likely affect the rest of their life isn't fair. But when should they decide? That's the question. Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by consultant editor at the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and Conservative councillor Claire Pearsall. Your thoughts, Claire?
I don't think they should be scrapped as a whole, but I do think that we need to look again at what we're teaching our young people.
OK, so the curriculum itself rather than the examination?
Absolutely. I don't think there's anything wrong with examinations. I think that coursework is also a very good way of judging how much you're learning, because it's an ongoing process. My English GCSE, taken a very, very long time ago, was coursework-based. That's very kind. It's true. It was coursework-based. So across the whole 2 years, all of my assignments were counted towards my final grade. Right. Now, my other subjects were exam-based. And broadly, it was pretty fair, looking at the work that I did.
The work you did at the start of your GCSE, so 2 years back, might not be as good as the work you do now when you're sitting your exam. So that's why an exam is better, surely.
But I think you can see the progression. So the stuff that you learn through, I did, this was English language and literature.
But is your progression as important as the knowledge you retain?
Yes, I think it is, because I think that's what we miss in life, is the fact that you can start with an opinion, you can start with knowledge being in one level, and then you grow, you learn, you adapt. And I think that's what our young people miss out on. You don't have that sense of developing an argument. You're either told, this is the way you do it, this is the opinion you should have. Now, we all know that life isn't like that, and we all have differing opinions, and this is why we're on GBNews, because we can have that. Yeah. So why not let our young people explore what their character is, what their personality is, through those kind of exams?
But that's not what school's for. School is to impart knowledge, to pass on the canon, the best there has been, and to give them our culture, our heritage, our history. It's not to give them opinions, it's to give them facts.
No, I disagree.
Well, I'll come back to you, Claire. Let's see what Andrew thinks as well.
Look, continuous assessment doesn't work. We know that, because what we saw happened in A-levels just in the last couple of years. So before the pandemic, I think people getting A's and A stars was around 19.5%, 20%. Last year, with teacher assessments, it soared to 45%. Grade inflation. That was degrading the qualifications these kids were achieving. But I'm glad you mentioned the 4 C's that Blair talks about. Critical thinking, creativity, communications, collaborative problem solving. What?
What do they mean?
What does it mean?
How do you teach creativity?
What does it... Exactly, your creativity. And here's the other thing. If you're an employer, or perhaps you want to consider someone for university, who are you going to consider more favourably? The one who's got A-levels, which they've achieved through a proper scrutiny, they've been studied hard for the exams, perhaps in physics, English and history, or these kids who've got the 4 C's and they've got an assessment based on what the teacher thinks. It's a no-brainer. You're going to go for the A-levels because they're a proper measure of someone's progress and ability.
Well, my question would be, why are we listening to Tony Blair on any of this?
Yeah, why don't we scrap him?
He's the one who said everyone should go to university, and now we've got all these kids going to universities doing fluffy degrees that mean nothing. I'm not a utilitarian. I don't think education is for the purpose of getting a job. But if it is, they're going through university and not getting a job at the other end. So
you really need a degree in golf course management. No.
Or transgender studies or whatever they've made up.
No, but I think one of the really big problems and I agree, I don't think we should scrap A-levels because it's really, really important to have that measure of what somebody has learned. But the problem is, I've interviewed people who have got all of the A stars at GCSE and at A-level. They've had all the education, they've gone to a very good university and come out with a lovely degree, and they cannot look you in the eye and have a conversation. And this is an interview for a job. Right. So we are missing those kind of skills.
Character.
character building, it is how you present yourself, it is confidence, it is
But
resilience.
is that the school's job or is that the parent's job? Because it used to be the case that school was supplementary to parenting. It used to help parents out. It used to be something additional. And now we're expecting schools to do all of the parenting for us, like the state has taken ownership of the child. How much of a responsibility does a parent have on a child's character?
Yeah, but I don't think it's...
School is knowledge, knowledge. Maths, English, science. A school shouldn't be, this is how you think.
But you shouldn't have that in isolation. A school should be there to encourage as well. Yes, parental involvement is important, but not all kids have that. As we've seen, some kids are left to their own devices. So how not, why not have a school that says, right, come on then, Jonathan, let's stand up and speak. Let's stand up and see what you can do. Because I think that is vitally important. You have a kid that can stand there and say what they're good at. It may not be an academic subject. They may be musical, they may be sporty, they may be more practical, they may be able to fix your car. Do you know what? Those skills are really, really important.
So that's a good point, Andrew. Do we need to focus more on vocational skills as well as academic ability?
Yeah, I agree with that, yeah. And BTEC exams are an important part of that, and the technical colleges, which were the great idea of Ken Baker, the Education Secretary from many years ago, all of that. But I still think you've got to keep exams. And I can tell you, my school, all those years ago, there was a really bright, swotty kid who did loads of essays for other kids and got paid. So just imagine how that's going to flourish under this new system.
Enterprising, that's good.
Very enterprising. I'm not going to say who that person is, but they've done very, very well in their future career. Yes, they have. It wasn't me, by the way. It wasn't me, and I did my own essays.
But did you pay the... Oh, you didn't pay the guy?
I didn't pay the guy, no.
We'll leave it there.
It's a guy.
Thank you very much, both of you. But this show is nothing without your views. So let's take a look at what you guys have been saying. We're going to listen... Well, we're going to hear from one of our great British voices first and foremost. This is your opportunity to get on the show and tell us exactly what you think about the topics we are discussing. This hour, we're going to head over to Snowdonia to speak to GB viewer Gareth Wynn Jones. Gareth, first of all, welcome to the show. I understand you're a farmer. Do you employ people on your farm? And if so, do they have the qualifications, the skills that they need? I can't hear Gareth at the moment, so we'll come back to him shortly once he's fixed his sound. Do you guys employ anybody in your line of work?
No.
Yes.
Okay, so do they come to you with the skills and talents that they need?
Yes and no. It's quite difficult because in politics, you can have people with varying different degrees, but what we really need is a bit of experience, a little bit of grit and determination, and that's kind of more important in the line of work that we have. And we also want people with empathy. When you're dealing with people's problems, you need to be... You can't, but you can bring it on. And I think the most successful people that we've had have been state-educated, clever kids, not necessarily with the best education.
Well, I'll tell you, actually, the reason I became a teacher in the first place is because I was hiring people to do web development and mobile app development, and they used to come to us with amazing CVs, great qualifications on paper, but they had no knowledge and no skills. And we literally couldn't recruit people in this country to do the job we wanted them to do. We had to outsource all the programming to East Asia and East Europe, and I don't think that's appropriate or acceptable.
No, and I think that's where we're heading at the moment. And it's unfortunate because our young people shouldn't be written off like that.
Great shame was that Michael Gove, who was doing a very good job at education, was moved out of that job because David Cameron, who was not much for Tory in my view, saw focus groups which suggested that he was unpopular at the school gate. Well, change often causes unpopularity.
Nobody likes change.
Nobody, but he should have been able to stick at it because he was doing well. Much better on that, I can say, rather than on Rotherham Children's City of Culture, which I gather is his idea.
I would say he was the best education minister we've had in a long time, and I know that's controversial, but let's see what Gareth Wynn Jones has to say on this matter. Gareth, are you with us?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, thank you very much. So fill me in. Are you employing people on your farm?
No, but I want to tell you a little story about a young lad in our village. His name's Rhys, and he's been helping on the farm for 12 months now. He was failed by the educational system, and he went from pillar to post, and he couldn't do anything. Over the last 12 months, he's been on the farm. He's fantastic as a worker. He's hands-on. We have to remember education is not for everybody in the form of sitting down in a classroom and just be, pushed into exams and learning things. And I think, again, the curriculum needs to be looked at, and we need to be teaching kids more skills, more hands-on skills, plumbers, electricians, carpenters, builders, all these people are really scarce at the moment. Everybody wants to go to university, get a massive overdraft, and then work for about 10 years to pay that off. I just think it's absolutely crazy. You know, we've got fruit and vegetables rotting in the fields because we can't get people out there to pick them because we haven't got the labour force. We need workers in this country as well, you know, and yeah, education is fantastic if you want to push on it and, you know, you enjoy it. But for me, education has its role for everyone in different ways. And I really believe that we need to be changing the whole system, the whole curriculum, and looking how these exams really do make a difference, because I don't think they do.
Gareth Wynn Jones there from Snowdonia. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Now it's time for our quick-fire debates, the part of the show where we discuss some of the other stories making the headlines. Joining me today is author and broadcaster, consultant editor at the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce. Your tagline just got a lot longer there.
I know.
Conservative councillor Claire Purcell. Can we add something else to yours?
Shorter. No, I think that'll do.
First story. Britain's families are set for a punishing increase in bills this winter after Ofgem confirmed an 80% rise in the energy price cap, sending the average household bill of up for between 1,971 to 3,549 from October. That's a yearly bill increase. That's ridiculous. Do you think the government should step in at this time, Andrew?
Well, it has to, because people just genuinely will not be able to pay it. But I think it's ridiculous to say Boris Johnson's got to do it. We're going to have a new Prime Minister in 9-10 days' time. She, because it will be Liz Truss, has to get on with this in the next 2 weeks, and there has to be money made available. But I don't go down the Labour Party route of freezing energy prices. A, it will be hugely expensive, but it also means the Queen will get the same benefit of her frozen electricity bill as somebody who's on benefits. We've got to target it at the people who need it most.
Claire, I see you're in agreement there. Can we cut these green levies? Can we cut VAT as well?
Get rid of
Yeah, you absolutely need to. I mean, that should be the first thing of the incoming Prime Minister, whoever he or she may be. They need to do that, and they need to do it quickly.
Yes. Is it means tested? Should it be kind of looking at how much people are earning before we...
Well, of course it should. And we need to get that money to the most vulnerable people.
And if you look at the International Monetary Fund, they have actually said that a universal sort of explosion is not the answer. It's got to be the people who need it most, because otherwise they'll suffer a lot more. And remember, poorer families, the energy bill is a much larger proportion of their income. And older people too, who often need to keep the heating on for longer, on fixed incomes, pensioners. They're going to need a lot of help.
Is it not the middle classes that are going to be squeezed the most from this?
Often the way.
It is often the way, and that's, you know, the unfortunate factor of it. But I don't think any of us want to see somebody who is reliant upon a kidney dialysis machine, for example, having to turn the power off and not have that life-saving treatment. Right. So do you know what? Sometimes, the middle classes and the just about managing are the ones to suffer. But when you look at the consequences, it has to be that way.
Absolutely. Authorities in Spain have said that women should have the right to go topless at public swimming pools. The Catalan regional authorities launched the move after they'd received complaints that women had been barred from going topless at public swimming pools. So it's launched a campaign to try and end the sexualisation of women's bodies by encouraging them to bare their breasts. That sounds like it might have the opposite effect. Do you think this is a good way of fighting sexism, or is this depravity? Claire?
I think it should be up to women whether they wish to or not.
OK.
And, you know, as a woman who is of a certain age, you know what, going out in a swimsuit is a really quite big thing. I don't feel that comfortable. I wouldn't go topless, just to reassure you all. But I think it should be up to that individual. I don't think it's for a government or a council or anybody else to make a campaign up around it. I think that is absolutely ridiculous.
Andrew, is this not indecent exposure? Is this not degeneracy?
Well, it's not, because we see men's chests, don't we? But as long as it's not...
But men and women are not the same.
Well, quite, I have noticed. But as long as we don't go down that men... I mean, I think actually it's a bit ridiculous, really. What is the point of it? Why
because we're falling into this trap of equality means the same.
Yeah.
Men and women are different. They should be acknowledged as a basic fundamental fact.
Can we point this out to the leader of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer, to struggle with this concept?
We could send him this clip, really, couldn't we? And,
I actually think about it, it's stupid.
It's uncouth.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the next one. On today's show, we've been asking, should Novak Djokovic be allowed to play in the US Open? According to our polls, 80% of you said yes, and only 20% of you said no. So it looks to me like the viewers are on our side. Or my side?
Your side.
Our side.
We're in the 20%.
We didn't
Are you going
persuade
to change
him.
your mind?
We didn't.
No. But I think you should change your mind on the fact he, with his great platform, could make the case for why he thinks it's right that he doesn't have to be vaccinated. It would be a great, interesting debate.
Why does that matter? What if his case is really terrible?
Because a lot of people are focusing on this and they want to know, why won't he be jabbed? Tell us why.
But it seems like it's going to be scrutinised. If he's spoken to the top scientists in the world, he has a really academic understanding of the vaccine and assumes that it doesn't work, maybe you'll come around. But if that's not the case, you're going to bring him down, aren't you?
Why doesn't he want to take people with him? He's got a great chance to do that. He's got millions of followers and fans.
If he did, I think a lot of people on your side of the fence would say he's not a medical professional. Who is he to say this?
Well, he could
it's
perhaps...
It's always going to be divisive, whatever he says. Whoever he's taken advice from, and whatever that advice is, it's 50% will hate him for it and think it's rubbish, and the other 50% will stand up for him. And I think that's where we are with this discussion.
He is a role model, especially to young people, and they will be thinking, why?
This whole...
Because young people ask that question all the time, don't they?
We do.
But surely, I think him not speaking out on his why is just as important as speaking out on it, because he's telling young people, you can own your body, no one else can dictate to you what you put in your body, and you don't have to explain it to a single person. I really admire and respect that.
Yeah, but you can then be denied the opportunity to take part in one of the great sporting events of the world.
But that's even better, that's even stronger, because he's saying his principles come before the game at any title. He is on track to become the greatest.
Oh, and he's made his decision.
It's Roger Federer.
Even
if he doesn't win the most titles, he's a hero.
He's there with Rafael Nadal. He's right there.
No, it doesn't matter. Roger Federer, my hero. I worship at the altar of Roger Federer.
Team Federer on this side as well.
OK, well, there we go. I'm outnumbered on this one. All I can say is thank you so much to my panel, both of you, consultant editor at the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and Conservative councillor Claire Pearsall. And thank you to you guys for joining me at home. Thank you for your company. I'll be back tomorrow at 4 p.m. But now I'll leave you with the weather forecast, just in case it's changed.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update. A bank holiday weekend for much of the UK, and most places are going to have a dry 3 days, with sunny spells as well. Feeling quite pleasant in the sunny spells as well, certainly on Saturday and Sunday. There's high pressure nearby, and it will be building in for the weekend. But for the time being, we do have this old weather front that's providing quite a few showers out there through this evening over parts of Wales and southern Scotland. 1 or 2 heavy ones over southwest Scotland. Tending to ease off as we go through the evening and overnight. Most of us will have a dry night with clear spells. Could just turn a little misty once more across East Anglia in the southeast. 1 or 2 fog patches here. Still quite warm here, but elsewhere reasonably comfortable night, and certainly across the northwest, temperatures well down into single figures in rural areas. So a coolish start here, but generally a sunny start. Most places having a fine, bright day on Saturday. Not everywhere dry. There will still be 1 or 2 showers scattered across northern England, 1 or 2 for the Midlands, maybe 1 or 2 in the south as well. But as I said, most places won't see those showers stay dry. A little warmer as well. Temperatures in the south in the mid-20s, further north, high teens or low 20s. Thickening cloud in the northwest will bring a bit of patchy rain to northern parts of Northern Ireland and western Scotland during Saturday evening, but elsewhere, any showers disappearing. For most dry and clear nights, and again, reasonably comfortable, although temperatures will start off in the teens as we